What's going on, guys? Matty Russell here. Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to go ahead, clean up some bok choy in the aquaponics system, transfer cauliflower from the aquaponics into the garden soil bed behind me here, harvest some of the spinach, and do an update on the quail. Let's get stuck into the video. Well, let me do a quick update on the bird situation here. The quail are doing really well, and we've got a number of males, as you can see, and females, and they've been breeding. The females, after their molt, have just come on the lay and are starting to lay eggs. These two females in this quail cage in the middle here are actually 8 to 9 weeks old. They've just started laying eggs in the last week, and so I've been collecting all of their eggs over the last 7 days, and I've popped them in the incubator. We currently have 32 eggs in the incubator. They started incubating yesterday, and I'm hoping for a good hatch rate. It's a brand new incubator, DIY. If you want to know how I built it, I will leave a link to that video in the description below. But it is time for me to do the maintenance on the bird cage. I need to clean out their manure and change their water, and so I'm going to get stuck into that right now. Well, as you can see here, guys, we've really started to collect quite a bit of manure, and the beautiful thing about quail manure is it's a beautiful, perfect, rich nitrogen source of fertilizer, but we have to wait until it breaks down before we can use it in the garden. Otherwise, it's just a little too potent, and we're more than likely going to be burning our plants. The flies are already really trying to get in here, and to minimize the smell and to keep the flies away, what I like to do is add a layer of shredded paper, which I actually got from the office at work. This is actually made up of people's private and personal information. We can't read it, obviously, and it's going to be further disposed of as it composts down with the manure. So essentially what's happening here is we have a nitrogen source with the manure, and we also have a carbon source with the paper. So we're layering this compost system, which is a good balance between the two. After it's decomposed and composted over the next few months, come spring, I'm going to actually lay this in the soil garden to add some extra fertilizer into the soil. Every other day I come out here and I scrape off their manure trays into the manure pile, and then every week or so I take their boards and spray them down with the hose just to give them a good clean up and to assure that we're maintaining a high level of hygiene within the breeding setup. So let's crank out the hose and give them a scrub down. Right, now that we've done their manure trays, it's time to change out their water and add some apple cider vinegar into the mix. If you'd like to find out more tips and tricks on how to look after quail, I'll leave a link to that video in the description below. Now I've actually got some mealworms which I've been breeding both to supplement the quail food and to supplement the fish food in the aquaponics system. I'm yet to have tried the mealworms with the quail, but I'm actually going to go ahead and grab some of the maggots out of the maggot farm, mealworms out of the mealworm harvester, and try them in with the quail and see how they enjoy them. Seems like one of the roos is quite excited about the idea of trying some maggots and mealworms. I know, mate. Well, I think it's safe to say that the maggots and the mealworms were a winner with the quail. Let me give you a look at the aquaponics system. We'll chuck the rest of the maggots in with the fish. Pretty safe to say the maggots are a winner with the jades as well. But let's give them a handful of their regular feed. Now when it comes to the aquaponics system, I've got a few things I need to do today. We need to clear out some of the cauliflower and broccoli bed. When I sowed them in there, I sowed them quite densely, and the bed actually needs to be thinned out a little bit to allow some room for the remaining plants to really begin to bloom, blossom, and produce their heads. I'm also going to harvest the bok choy. We're going to blanch it and put it in the freezer in preparation for future meals. And I'll also give you a look at how the tomatoes are coming along. Well, as you can see, we do have quite a few clusters beginning to form. Looking forward to harvesting some of those tomatoes in the near future. Now the bok choy has grown quite impressively in the system here, and as you can see, a couple of them are flowering and beginning to go to seed. I'm actually going to let it go to seed and collect some of those seeds so that I can sow them next year. Well, let's get stuck into thinning out the broccoli and the cauliflower bed and harvesting a bunch of that bok choy. Well, after thinning out the cauliflower and broccoli bed, I came away with quite a few cauliflower left over, so I'm going to go ahead and plant them into the soil garden around the other side of the yard after I harvest some of the spinach. Well guys, I think it's safe to say that we've come away with quite a good bok choy harvest in the aquaponics. Bok choy is one of the great green vegetables that seems to do really well in the aquaponics system. So if you're thinking about sowing it into your system and growing it for some tucker for your family, then I'd say it's definitely a thumbs up from me. If you're getting a lot out of this video, give it a thumbs up. It helps the algorithm. Now guys, the bok choy that was going to seed and beginning to bolt that was in the bok choy garden, I've decided to take out and pop here next to the lettuce, which is also bolting and going to seed. But while we're here, I'll give you a look at some of the dragon fruit that we have, some suckers which were pulled off of a friend's dragon fruit vine. And I've popped them in here probably about 3 to 4 weeks ago now, and we'll just see whether or not they're starting to root. Happy days. Roots are starting to develop. We'll pop him back in here, but that is going to go into the ground. Both of these are going to go into the ground in a future episode. Now I ended up coming away with about 5 cauliflower plants, so let's get them from the aquaponics system around to the soil garden and transplant them as soon as possible. While I'm here, I'll give you a quick look at the aquaponics system. As you can see, some of the Bok Choy that we sowed in here in a previous episode have begun to germinate and pop through their first set of leaves. So I'm going to leave them in there for about another week, and then I'm going to transplant most of them into the aquaponics system in the bed that we harvested the bok choy from. Now in this bed here, we do have quite a bit of Iron Man spinach. I think it's the type of spinach that Popeye used to eat. It's a broadleaf spinach that grows quite large and prolifically, and we're going to go ahead now and harvest about 5 of these plants. I'm also going to go ahead and blanch these and freeze them in order to use for cooking in the future. So let's get a few of these out of the ground and transplant these cauliflower in their place. Well, we've harvested the Iron Man spinach and we've popped the cauliflower into the ground. I must say I'm very happy with the yields that I've got out of the Iron Man spinach in the ground. But now it's time to go ahead and water in the cauliflower with some power feed. That's actually a seaweed solution mixed with a fish emulsion. It's really going to help the cauliflower plants get established in the soil since they come out of the aquaponics system and minimize transfer shock. While we're here, guys, I'll give you a look at what we got growing on in the garden. We have some red Russian kale over the back there with some dinosaur kale, silver beet coming along very nicely, and some perpetual spinach, which is doing quite well also. Over the back, we'll give you a look here. We got a tomato sucker, which is really taken off. One that I rooted out in the aquaponics system and popped in the ground. But here we have more cherry tomatoes and developing some nice clusters there, coming along very nicely. Another sucker down here which is also doing quite well, and some more cherry tomato plants that I've trellised up the back fence there. Seems you stuck around to this far, you might as well subscribe to the channel and hit that bell notification so that you can be notified when the next video goes live, and that way you'll be able to see how these transplants of cauliflower go in the ground.